Now, when sending HTTP requests, no matter if you're sending data or fetching data, sometimes things can also go wrong. And to show you a scenario where things do go wrong, I'll go back to the grocery list, and there in load items, I can simulate such an error by using an invalid project ID here. ABC, for example. If I do that, and I save and reload, you will see that here we're stuck on the loading screen. Nothing happens. And this happens because if you take a look at the debug console, in the end here I got an error. Now the exact error message might be different. It depends on the problem you're facing. But the main problem here, of course, is that we're not getting back the data from this backend because here the URL is wrong. Now, of course, that's an error you typically can avoid as a developer. You can simply test this app and use the correct URL. I'm just using this scenario here as a demo. But of course, you can definitely face some problems when sending requests because, for example, the Firebase servers could be offline temporarily or anything like that. Therefore, when sending HTTP requests, you must be prepared for things to go wrong. And you can find out if something went wrong by taking a look at the response status code. If I print this here and I reload so that this app restarts, you can now see in the debug console that somewhere in here you will find this status code. In my case here, 404, because it doesn't find a project with that ID here, as it seems. Or it doesn't find a shopping list node there, at least. And as I mentioned before, if status code is greater than 400, you basically have a problem because all these 400 and 500 codes are error codes. And here we might want to check for our status code to be greater or equal than 400 to then show an error message to the user instead of keeping them stuck on this loading screen. At least we don't want to keep them there without telling them that something's wrong. Now you can either check for any error, as I'm doing it here, or look for individual error codes like 404, which you get if a resource has not been found, to show error-specific error messages. That's up to you. Here I'll use the more general approach. But with that, we can now introduce a new state variable, error, which might be null, and which should eventually be a string if it's not null. So that's how we can define it, a property which may be null, but which, if it's not null, should be a string. We can set error here if we do have an error status code. In that case, we could set error to failed to fetch data, please try again later. Something like this. The exact error message, of course, is up to you. Now with that, you can then go down to your build method again, and there, at the very end, after all these other if checks, I want to add another if check and check if error is not equal to null, which you can check like this. And if that's the case, I know that I have an error, and in that case, I don't care about what I wanted to display as content, if it was the fallback or the progress indicator. I don't care about that. Instead, I want to render my error message. And for that, I'll copy this here and set content equal to this, but now the text here will be the error message stored in error, and therefore this can't be const anymore. Here we should also add an exclamation mark because we know that error won't be null, because that's literally what we're checking here. So with that, I'm setting my content of this screen to this error message if we have an error. Of course, now I just must make sure that in load items, where I'm setting error, I also call set state, because since I'm outputting the error in the UI, I also must make sure that the UI is updated if an error occurs. And we do that with set state, of course. And with that, if I save this and force a reload, now we get this error message here if things go wrong, and that's arguably, of course, a better user experience than what we had before. With that, I just want to add a dot here at the end. I'm happy with that, and we definitely improved the app. Now with that adjustment made, I will of course grab the correct URL again and use that again, because I don't want to break this app. without HTTPS and this slash here, by the way. Because I don't want to break this app, I just wanted to show you how you could handle errors. Of course, the default case here is that we don't have an error.